when you think about this alternative reality and the exploration by drugs with psychedelic drugs, and then the pervasive problem with other sorts of drugs in the society, and it cuts very close to the core of ourselves as creatures. I mean, we are addictive animals. We addict to everything. We addict to each other and glorify it as our most noble outpouring of sentiment in the phenomenon of romantic love. I mean, when a pair of lovers are parted, the withdrawal symptoms are indistinguishable from heroin. I mean, vomiting, shaking, uncontrollable emotional outbursts, sleeplessness, short temper, hysteria. This is real. It is what romantic love is a pheromonal bonding, an exchange of chemical messengers which takes these two autonomous organisms and welds them into one galaxy of need and intention and understanding and expectation. Well, then you just tear that apart and people are, shook up. We addict to political ideals, all kinds. I mean, it's wonderful what's happening in Peking, but several decades ago, the same thing was happening in Berlin to a different beat. People find an idea and it works, and all barriers appear to be movable and all goals attainable. We addict to things. This is like magpies, but then through media trained to propel ourselves into ever more extensive relationships with objects. We invent money, which is kind of a multi-transformable drug. It stands for everything, everything you ever wanted, and you can addict to money. Nevertheless, what I will argue during this month is that that this is not a bad thing, that we have a secret history that I will try to convince you of, and you should try to convince me that I'm wrong, and we will argue over the secret history of the human race and why it is, therefore, that we are as we are, and why it is that these psychedelics are not some peripheral issue of screwballs who can see God in a cabbage, but that, in fact, the issue of psychedelics is directly on the tracks of the onrushing locomotive of rationalist, paternalist, schlockola society, and that it ain't going to go away, because what we're talking about here is a nude part of the human mind. What we're talking about here is something which takes its place in the great unfolding of the defining of human freedom that characterizes the entire adventure of global civilization. In other words, we've got the Pope under control. That happened in the Middle Ages. Slavery has now been generally embraced as a bad thing to be into, and we've gotten that on the books as a bad idea. Women have been suddenly recognized to be human beings, and so forth. So this swelling bubble of aha and perception of the real nature of the universe should also include the sudden realization that governments have no business telling people what foods and spices they should prefer, that this is an absurd role for government, and that, like slavery, like the subjugation of women, the legal persecution of dietary habits has just got to take its place with the high-button shoe. And we will talk a lot about the consequences of this. What does it mean? Because you see, what the government would have us believe, and perhaps believes itself, although I doubt it, is that we would return to the beast. That's all. You know, we would just shoot junk and toot blow and flop around in ruinous orgies until hell froze over. And they, wiser, sterner, more disciplined than ourselves, represent the edifice of moral authority. This is a I'm doing it for your own good trip, see? And actually, this is all hypocrisy, and we will talk about that, the roles of governments in the promulgation of drugs and drug cartels, and how, this is what I learned doing this book for Bantam, is that drugs have always been there and have always been manipulated by governments. I mean, this is almost what money was invented for, was to do